Do you have an ever-growing stash of craft supplies? I sure do, and it seems to take over my house from time to time, so I have several projects that you won't believe that I made with things that I've had on hand for quite some time. Thank you for stopping by Lavender and Lace. I'm Alicia. Welcome back to my viewers that come and see me each week, and hello if you are new here. Thank you for stopping by. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy these projects, and I hope you will consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. And let's get started with these craft stash buster projects. I picked up this home decor piece at Hobby Lobby last year in the spring, and I've just had it sitting in my closet. Wasn't exactly sure how I wanted to change this and repurpose this. So I thought this background was perfect to do a crackle effect since it was already stained that dark color. So that is exactly what I did. I just used my Elmer's glue and just put down a thin layer of that, and before it dried I went back in with another thin layer of my plaster colored chalk paint, and then I just take my heat gun and get that crackle effect. And I love this technique. It is one of my favorite things to do, just to give a piece some of that vintage farmhouse vibe. And I just repeated those steps for all of the boxes on my wood piece. And I think you could probably leave this as is and have it as a tic-tac-toe game. That would be something that you could do with this as well. And to start working on my chickens, I did a thin coat of Mod Podge on each of those, and I set those aside to dry while I worked on the eggs. So there were 5 chickens and 4 eggs, and I picked 4 different colors of my chalk paints that I had on hand. I did a brown color, a pink, a green, and a blue, and I just painted one of those eggs with one of those colors. And I have had chickens in the past. I don't have any right now, but they are a lot of fun to have. And you can get different breeds of chickens, and they will lay the different colored eggs. So I was showing you one of the eggs that I had on hand. My mom has chickens right now, and we get eggs from her. So that's just a fun fact for you guys. And just to jazz up my chickens a little bit, I grabbed one of these napkins that I had in my stash and just cut that down. I cut out the 4 different patterns first, and then I just cut out smaller sections of that napkin for each of my chickens. And I just used one of my little Cricut mini press to iron on that napkin, and I used a Teflon sheet to protect that. And I did that for each of my chickens. And I saw Tracy over at Country Charm by Tracy, and I will link her channel for you guys, do this technique where you just burn that excess napkin off of an odd shape, and that just allows that napkin to completely form to whatever shape that you are working with. And I absolutely loved that technique. I will be doing that again for sure. And I just went back around the edges with that lighter and burned off any of the excess that may not have done that during the first go around. And I absolutely love the charred color that you get on the edges when you burn the napkin like that. And just to seal that in, I did go back in with just another thin layer of Mod Podge and let those dry completely. And I did a dry fit with all of my chickens and my eggs just to see how I wanted them. And for some reason, they had one chicken that was turned the opposite direction of the other ones. So I chose to put that one in the very center of my piece. So I just laid everything out, and then I just glued everything down with some hot glue. And something I would love to know, do any of you have chickens right now? If you do, what kind do you have and how many? My favorites have been the Golden Comets, and I also love Americanas because they lay those colored eggs. And I wanted to give this decor piece a sign, a little something extra to go on the top. So I took just a small wood piece that I get from the Dollar Tree and 3 of the small wood blocks that you can get there as well. And then I did a couple of coats of my Waverly chalk paint in the color Celery. I did the front, the sides, and the back. And I took some of my antique wax and a baby wipe and just rubbed that all over the surface of my sign just to give that a little bit of distressing. And I had this cute pack of designs from Couture. This one says the chick-in farm fresh eggs, and I thought that was absolutely perfect for this project, and it fit perfectly on my little wooden sign. So I just fuzzed that really well and centered that on my sign. And I took one of my mini squeegees and my black chalk paste and just applied that to the top of my transfer. And you could do your own handwriting, stickers, stamps, a Cricut cutout, whatever, a decal, whatever that you might want to do for this part. And then I just carefully peeled back that silkscreen transfer, and I took that over to my sink and washed off that ink immediately. And just to attach this to the top of my sign, I centered that and used a pencil to mark out where that would need to go. And I just go back in with some hot glue on the bottom of each of those little wooden squares and glued that to the top of my sign. And just to give this a little bit of extra texture, I took some of my Spanish moss and I glued that into each of the sections with the eggs. I thought that would make it look a little bit more like a nesting box that you have in a chicken coop. And that also helped me to clean up any of the paint that I wasn't able to completely keep in each of those sections. I did have a hard time doing that, even though I was super careful with that paint. But I just love the effect that you get with this Spanish moss. And I just trimmed up any of those longer pieces of that Spanish moss, and this one is finished. I absolutely love how this turns out. I think it is super cute, and this will make a great decor piece for spring or all year, and this will make a great gift for any chicken lovers that you might have in your family. Today's video is part of the Craft Your Stash Open collab with Crafting My Best Life with Lisa and Kristin Kay. Be sure that you guys check out their channels, which are linked in the description box, as well as the playlist. You guys don't want to miss out all of these awesome projects from these talented creators. So be sure that you check out each of those videos and show these ladies some love and support. And let's get back with today's projects. For this next project, I just started by taking apart a couple of the smaller picture frames that you can find at Dollar Tree, and these are the ones that have the kind of folded look metal piece on the front that has the clip on there. So I just needed that metal piece, so I did remove the clip and I set those aside, and I will save those to use with another project. Just remove that background, and I will also be reusing those picture frames as well. And then I grabbed a couple of those very flat wooden planks that come in a multi-pack from the Dollar Tree, and I wanted to glue those onto the back of these metal pieces just to give those some extra support for this project. And I did need to cut down one of those pieces into a smaller size, so I just used my miter shears to do that. I just went back and forth with that until I was able to completely snap that piece in half. And to attach my wooden pieces to that metal, I did use a combination of E6000 and some hot glue. I thought this would be my best option just to make sure that everything stuck together very well and wouldn't come apart on me. And for the next step to this project, I grabbed two of the, I guess these would be the medium size of those nesting boxes that you can find at Dollar Tree as well. And I glued two of those together just using some of the wood glue, super glue, and some hot glue. Just made sure I had all of the sides flush and everything lined up nicely. And I took some of my antique wax from Waverly and I stained both of those boxes. I did all of the inside, the bottom, and the back portion of each of those boxes. And I just used a paper towel to remove any of that excess wax. You could also use a baby wipe if you want a lighter color from your stain. And I also stained the underside of my tin roof as well. I want this to look professional and everything look like it goes together. And I had some of these square dowel rods in my stash. I picked these up from Hobby Lobby and I needed 4 support beams out of those. So I just measured them to the height that I wanted them. And I actually just used that 10 to kind of get me a little guideline to go by to cut these down to size with my miter shears. And the 2 in the back were a little bit longer than the 2 that are going to be going into the front of this box. And I stained each of those pieces as well and just wiped off the excess once again. And I let all of my stained pieces dry very well. And then I went back in with some of my Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster and used one of my small chip brushes. I think these work the best when you are doing a dry brushing technique. And I went over each of the stained pieces with that plaster colored chalk wax until I was happy with the results that I was getting. I did just a very light dry brushing with this and I love the way this turned out. And have you guys figured out what I am making yet? I did put a sneak peek of this under my community tab on my channel. And just to glue in my support pieces, I used some hot glue in the corners, and I did try to put a little bit of that along the sides of those dowel rods as well. And I actually had some chicken wire on my front porch that I keep in one of my planter barrels out there to keep the cats out of. So I just grabbed a small piece of that. That is going to be going onto the back of this project. And this part took me just a little while to figure out how I wanted to attach that chicken wire because this wood is super thin and I knew I wouldn't be able to use like a heavy duty staple gun or anything like that. I was afraid that I would crack it. So I just put that where I wanted it, put down some marks with a pencil and just took my awl and I was able to put holes where I needed it to be able to secure that chicken wire. That worked great for this. I'm so glad that I have one of these in my stash. And I also had kept some smaller pieces of wire. So I just used my 10 snips and cut that down into some smaller sections. And that allowed me just to be able to easily bend those and put those in each of the holes around a section of that chicken wire. And I did that all along the back of both of my boxes just to secure that. And that's actually what we use on our big chicken coop outside. We use that chicken wire and just some staples to attach that to all of the posts and supports. And for this one, I just twisted each of those wire pieces on the inside of the boxes to help hold that chicken wire in place. I tried to get those as tight as I could. So with all of my hints and everything, I guess you guys have probably figured out that I am making either, you could have this be mini nesting boxes or a mini chicken coop, whichever you want that to be. And I just grabbed a couple of more pieces of some wire that I had on hand and added that to the top of each of my dowel rods on the back. And I just trimmed down that chicken wire with my 10 snips. I trim that along the top and each of the sides as well. Just make sure that if you're trimming that chicken wire that you don't cut past the twist there, or everything will come undone and you don't want that. And to attach my roof, I just put some hot glue on the tops of each of those dowels, and I held that in place until that glue was dry and secure. And I added a little bit extra glue around each of the sides of those dowels so this would be nice and stable. And I just repeated those steps on the front of my box, and my roof wasn't big enough to completely come to the edge of those boxes on the front, so I just figured out where I needed those to be and marked some lines with my pencil and added my hot glue. And I glued the bottom first and then I glued the top, and this was very helpful to have an extra set of hands during this step. Gracelyn helped me get these two dowels in on the front. And I wanted to add some floral foam to my boxes just so I would be able to put in my succulents. So I just cut those down into smaller pieces that would fit in each of those boxes. And I just glued each of those sections down with some hot glue until I had each of those boxes filled. And I had several different types and colors of succulents. I've probably had these for a couple of years, and I just pulled those out of each of the little pots that they came in. That was styrofoam, so they pulled out very easily. And I also found some of this new greenery at Dollar Tree pretty recently. They call it eucalyptus, but I just cut down some smaller pieces. I had a couple of different colors of that, a lighter green and a darker green. And I just started placing each of my pieces down into that styrofoam, which gave me some holes, some guidelines to go by when I started gluing all of that down. And for me, what worked the best was I just put a lot of hot glue over some of those holes that I had already made and started gluing in all of my pieces of greenery. I started with those taller and longer pieces in the back of each of my boxes. And then I just glued all of the smaller ones towards the front until I was happy with how that looked. I just kept adding until I liked the finished product. And to fill in those gaps so I wouldn't be able to see that floral foam, I just added a lot of hot glue and went in with some of my Spanish moss and just tucked that in here and there until I had all of that covered. And this is finished. I absolutely love this. This is one of the cutest things that I think I have made so far, and it looks perfect in my kitchen window. What do you guys think about this one? I've had these two wooden mason jars in my stash probably since last Valentine's Day, I think, is when I found these. And I wanted a clean slate for this project, so I just removed the jute twine, the metal piece at the top, all of the stickers, and I used my little Cricut tool to help me remove that paper on the front as much as I was able to. Sometimes this pulls off a lot cleaner than this. This one just pulled off that top layer and left that brown paper underneath. So I did take both of these outside and just sanded them down so I had a nice clean surface to work with. And then I grabbed my Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster, and I gave that larger one 2 coats of that, and the smaller one I just did 1 coat. I wanted some of that brown color showing through that one. And I did just a little bit of dry brushing on all of the sides of both of my mason jars. And on the larger jar, I did just a thin coat of my matte Mod Podge, excuse me, and I just let that dry completely. And I found some really pretty watercolor designs on Creative Fabrica, and I love this strawberry print. I will actually be making some strawberry jam here in the next couple of weeks, so I thought this was a fitting and timely project to do. I do a lot of canning every year, pretty much in the spring. In March, I do make strawberry jam. So that's something that I always have on hand. And then I do extra canning and things like that later on in the summer. I just took my Cricut mini press, reactivated that Mod Podge, heated that up, and it just attached well to this larger mason jar, and just took my fingernail file and went around all of the edges just to remove that excess tissue paper. And to seal everything in, I just did another light coat of Mod Podge. I know you guys, if you've watched my channels, have seen this process many times before, but it just works perfectly, and it is just a very simple and easy way to add a decoration to a piece. And I also created this cut file in my Cricut design space. I thought this was so cute, and I love the little strawberry there. This is just a perfect complement to the larger mason jar. So I just cut that out, weeded it, and applied it to my smaller mason jar. Just removed my transfer tape. And just to decorate up my mason jars a little bit, I added some of this really pretty print fabric to the smaller one. I just cut that down to the size that I needed, and I tacked that down on the top and both of the sides with just a little bit of hot glue. And I did this same thing with my larger mason jar. I just didn't show that to you guys. I just took a kind of burlap piece of fabric and added it to that one. And I just took a pretty long piece of jute twine. I wanted to be able to wrap this around the top of my jar a couple of times and just tied that with a simple shoelace bow. And that is it for these projects. This is going to look perfect in my kitchen. And I would love to know, do you guys do any canning? Let me know in the comments. I have had these wooden drawers in my stash probably for 3 years now. I picked them up at a local antique store. They have some hardware on the top. Some of them had some stamps on the inside. I think I picked these up for $4 a piece, and I got 5 of them. And I have redone some of them already, but I grabbed another one of these and I just sanded that down really well just to remove a little bit of that varnish or stain that they had put on this. And I grabbed 3 different wooden boxes that you can get from the Dollar Tree, and I stained each of those as well. I wanted them to match the wood from the drawer as best as I could, so I used a baby wipe with my antique wax, and I really like the results that I got for these. And I just used some hot glue to attach all of those together. And I did use 2 of the larger ones and 1 of the smaller ones for this project. And then I just went into Cricut Design Space and designed this stencil. And I used some vinyl from the Dollar Tree and just cut that out and reverse weeded that and applied it with some of my transfer tape. And then I went over the entire stencil with just a light coat of Mod Podge, and I used one of my foam pouncers to do that. And I did let this dry overnight actually, and I went back in with some acrylic paint in the color white with another one of my foam pouncers. I think these work better than the stencil brushes. I've tried both of them and I always get better results with my foam pouncers. And I did a couple of coats of my white paint on each of my stencil designs. And I decided to let my paint dry almost completely before I removed my vinyl. I didn't want this to be completely crisp, perfect lines. I wanted this to look like it was very vintage, of course. So I just carefully peeled back the vinyl from each of the areas that I had put the paint for the stencil. And normally when I do stencils like this, I remove that before the paint dries, but I just decided to let it dry this time. I was afraid that some of that paint would pull up, and it did in some of those areas, but it just gave me the vibe and the look that I was going for this project. And once I got the larger pieces of vinyl pulled up, I just go back in with my weeding tool and just remove all of those smaller sections and the centers of all of the letters from each of the designs. And then just to finish off this larger wooden piece, I do go in with a thin coat of Mod Podge just to seal in all of my paint. I don't want that to chip off anymore when I have this in storage. And that's all I did for that larger one. And I found these absolutely gorgeous printable seed packets on Etsy. Be sure you check the description box. I will leave the link for those there. These only cost me a couple of dollars, and I think you got 27, I want to say, seed packets. They had flowers, vegetables, and herbs. So I just sized those to the size that I wanted them to fit in my smaller boxes and cut those out with my paper cutter, and I added them to those small wooden boxes, and this is just a beautiful decor piece. Absolutely love this. This is a larger one, and I opted not to glue the seed display boxes to this, so I will be able to have that as two pieces, put it together if I want to or not. But let me know what you guys think about this one. That wraps up our projects for today. I hope you guys enjoyed all of these ideas, and please give me a thumbs up if you did. I would also love to know which of these is your favorite. I always enjoy reading comments from all of you. And remember to check out that playlist. You guys don't want to miss any of those videos. Please connect with me on Facebook and Instagram. There are links to both of those in the description box as well. I hope you all have a blessed day, and I will see you in the next one.